Fala, Filipe, tudo bom?
Good evening, Filipe.
Assim, eu senti burburinho ali na coletiva do Danilo que
I could hear a bit of noise in Danilo's press conference that Flamengo might play with the three centre-backs. Could you
no
talk
Brasil a
about
gente tem uma visão
that?
simplória que entrar com três zagueiros é um time mais defensivo. Eu queria entender quais
And
são
typically in
as
Brazil, we
qualidades
think if you play
ofensivas
with
que
a
um time
back
ganha
three,
ao
that's a
estar com três
more
zagueiros,
defensive
liberá-los, enfim.
setup.
Se puder explicar um pouquinho pra
But
gente.
could you explain how that could help you attacking-wise, maybe free up the wing-backs, for instance? There's always an opportunity to play with a back three with,
São grandes zagueiros, então ter
and we've got 4 or 5 very good centre-backs, including
altíssimo
Clayton.
nível como
And we've got 3 top-class
sempre te abre
Leo
a
Ortiz,
possibilidade desse leque,
Danilo et
você
al.
poder jogar com três zagueiros.
So you can play with 3 centre-backs.
Defensiva, mas
It does change a lot in terms of the defensive setup, but going forward,
3-5-2, dependendo
often it can be a 3-4-3, a 3-5-2, depending on the game.
não mudaria
Depending what the opposition is asking of you, it doesn't change a great deal.
a escolha amanhã.
But we'll see what I pick tomorrow. Hi, Felipe.
Felipe, pergunta básica. Você já definiu a escalação?
A very basic question. Do you already have your starting 11 in your mind?
Já
And could you reveal your starting 11 if so? Yes, I have already decided on the starting 11. I already know who's going to play. They don't know yet. That's as simple as that.
Aqui atrás, Felipe.
Back here, Felipe? Where?
Aqui no fundo, Felipe, nas câmeras. Monique
Back here,
Daniela,
Felipe.
TNT Esporte.
TNT
Curiosamente,
Sports.
essa semana, resgataram um trechinho de uma entrevista que você deu pra gente há alguns anos.
This week I saw an interview that you gave a few years ago in 2011
na final do
when it
Mundial.
was a game between Santos and Barcelona in the Club World Cup final.
Sobre a forma, do Santos jogar naquele jogo, você fala que se o Santos
And when you were
fosse
asked
pra
about
cima
the
do Barça,
form,
que
you
poderia
said that
tomar
Santos...
5, naquele jogo. Eu sei que são equipes completamente diferentes.
I know that they're completely different teams, and now it's Flamengo against Bayern, but I wanted to ask you about
Mudou ao longo
how
desses
much football has
anos e
changed
que
over
faz
those
com que hoje
years.
o Flamengo possa entrar nesse jogo
And
de amanhã
why
em condições
can
de ser
Flamengo
que
approach
propõe
tomorrow's
jogo,
game?
que agride e que pode jogar de igual
The team
para
that's
igual
trying to
com
play
equipes como
football and go
Chelsea e
toe-to-toe
Bayern.
with teams like Chelsea and Bayern Munich as well.
Mudou muito, né? Muito. Claro que
Football's changed a great deal. Of course, when I spoke in 2011,
fácil falar
it was very
na
easy
posição que eu estava e acabou dando
to talk in the position that I was, and
diferente, né? Dando certo pelo que eu falei, não pro Santos, né, no caso, mas
it was right what I said, and it didn't go well for Santos, but
com aquele Barça do Messi, né, o Bar do
I don't think that any team that was as good as that Barcelona team with Messi.
time absurdo que entrava no campo
It was a crazy
era não tomar
team that went out there on the pitch, and the only objective for the opposition was to go out there and not concede a whole host of goals. Times have changed, coaches have changed, players have changed, and social media has changed as well in terms of the players' behavior and the fans' behavior as well.
formação do futebol.
So we're still in the midst of this transformation in football, but
Então,
there have been big tactical overhauls since then.
o difícil que é, né, jogar contra qualquer time hoje,
And you see that how difficult it is to play against any opposition.
como também
We've seen that the European giants have even struggled in games here, and the same goes for the Copa Libertadores, and that's the competitive side of football.
como eu falei também nas outras entrevistas,
So as I said in other interviews, Flamengo have a certain way of playing.
DNA como, né, o torcedor gosta.
We have a DNA, as the fans like to talk about, and the fans really identify with our DNA, and I won't do away with that style, and that's the only message I have for the players as Flamengo head coach, and also in terms of the academy coaches, that's the way Flamengo play.
No campo vai determinar em que altura
Of course, the opposition's strength and the way they play is ultimately going to dictate how high up the pitch we play and how we play, but we're going to see what happens.
não abre mão das nossas filosofias.
But ultimately, we won't do away with our footballing philosophy.
Também, o Bruno Henrique disse que
Hi, Felipe. Bruno Henrique said that in terms of the way Bayern play,
alta de
they mark high, they press high.
pode ser o caminho para o Flamengo.
Pace could be the route forward for Flamengo.
Você acha também que o caminho está por aí, na velocidade?
Do you think that that could be the way to approach this game in terms of pace and intensity? Is that the way you're setting up the team ahead of tomorrow's game?
Assim, Entendo o que o Bruno falou, entendo a tua pergunta.
I understand what Bruno Henrique was saying, I understand your question, but the way the team is going to play is going to depend a great deal on how the opposition defend against us.
Da pressão esmagadora.
Bayern press
Uma pressão muitas das vezes
and really try and dominate you with that press 1v1 across the pitch.
time muito bem organizado dentro.
And they chase you all over the pitch, but they're very organized within that shape as well in terms of that man-to-man pressing, and it is very difficult.
De uma maneira individual, a gente
You often see the man marking all over the pitch, and therefore the game becomes a little bit disorganized because often you use your positional shape. But in the case of Bayern Munich, they're a very organized side. They press very high,
os gatilhos que eles têm para pressionar.
and they all know
Eu acredito que sim.
where and when to press. So I do think we'll need to play quickly, but we'll also need to keep the ball.
Achar que nós vamos jogar nas
We can't simply think that we're going to play the ball in behind their defenders, because that's not the way it works. Because
esse tipo de
if Bayern have centre-backs, they play for Bayern because they know how to manage the space in behind them.
velocidade.
Sometimes the game is going to require us to produce pace, and other times less so.
To Nigeria, 6 matches so far at this particular venue, and 1 win recorded, which was against your next opponent, which was for your next opponent, Bayern Munich. So is this a kind of prayer on your team, and how do you plan to approach the game?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
6 matches have been played so far at this pitch.
This picture.
Yeah, and we've recorded just 1 win, which was for Bayern Munich, who you are facing next. So is this a kind of prayer on your team, and how do you plan to approach this game?
Well, you mean this pitch here, this stadium? 6. Okay, 6 games here in this stadium. Okay, but I was there, and the pitch was amazing. Okay. E quem ganhou? Oh, Bayern. Okay. So no, but I was there on the pitch now, and the grass is amazing. The stadium is so beautiful. Well, we know where we are and how they take care of things here in America, so they know how to sell the product, and it's amazing stadium. It's an honor to play this kind of games here, and for Bayern, they know already how to play here because they already played. No, but we are also used to playing a lot of different stadiums and a lot of different kind of grass, and we are ready to face this amazing challenge we have in front of us. And Bayern is one of the biggest teams in the world, and we have to be in our best day to try to win the game.
Filipe, João Guilherme, Flamengo TV.
Hi, Felipe.
São os dois técnicos mais jovens.
You and Vincent Kompany are the 2 youngest coaches at the Club World Cup.
São contemporâneos.
I think that's quite cool. But you are peers. But you never came up against one another as players. And now you have this first matchup in the dugout as coaches just starting out in your careers. What are your expectations of this tactical meeting? And are there any similarities between Kompany as a head coach and Filipe Luís as a head coach? I don't think so. Every coach has their way of being, the way that they manage the team, and we try and convey our message and our footballing philosophy on a daily basis to the players so that they understand not only what we want in terms of the game, tactics, but also our way of life. We try and convey those behavioral patterns day in, day out. I'm well aware of his career, and I know what a great character he has, but I've never come up against him. What I can say is, tactically, I have studied his team a great deal. Even with Burnley last year, he did a lot of very interesting things. And this season, at the start of the year, I watched a number of Bayern matches because he had some very interesting ideas. As I've always said to you, I try and pinch things from other colleagues and copy things, and Bayern really have been a reference point for us in terms of copying things because they've done some very interesting things this season. I had the opportunity to watch a number of their games at the start of the season. They've really settled into this playing style very well, the players, and they're certainly one of the most powerful opposition sides we could come up against.
Enfrentamento, esse tipo de duelo é o que todo jogador, todo
In terms of a matchup, these are the sort of game that every coach and player would love to be involved in.
grande poder estar participando.
And so, as I said, it's a huge privilege to be involved in Club World Cup, which has been so special, so well organized, and also to be involved in fixtures such as this. So it is a huge privilege.
Júlio,
Hi, Filipe.
Júlio Gomes, o Band.
Júlio
A
Gomes.
gente sempre fala muito no Brasil e especulou-se tanto nos últimos anos sobre
People in Brazil have been speculated a lot. How would this team do in the Champions League or in the Premier League? Whereas Flamengo are now up against a Champions League side, a Bayern Munich, then maybe Paris Saint-Germain, so on and so forth, if you were to make it through. Could you talk a little bit about that? Flamengo being involved in this virtual Champions League, and in the dressing room, do you think that you have a Champions League squad?
Desde que eu cheguei no Flamengo,
That's an eternal debate ever since I moved to Flamengo in 2019.
de televisão, né, que sempre se
There have always been these TV programs.
nunca vai jogar Champions League.
Flamengo, are they going to win the Premier League or the Champions League? And they're never going to be involved in these competitions. We're involved in the Club World Cup,
Enfrentamento contra esses times que jogam a Champions League.
and we're up against these teams that do play in the Champions League, albeit in a completely different context. They're not playing at home, we're not playing at home. It's a different temperature, different conditions.
Discussões que não levam absolutamente.
And I don't think these debates or comparisons actually lead to anything. This makes no sense. It's pointless to talk about this as to whether we could play in the Champions League or not. What I can say is there are a number of players in my squad that have played in the Champions League. There are also national team players. We had 5 Brazilian national team players in the recent squad. We've got Uruguayan internationals and so on and so forth. So we've got a very
Das nossas capacidades, eu acredito
gifted squad. And I do believe,
de que nossos jogadores são
and I
capazes
have a great amount of conviction that our players can go toe-to-toe with this Bayern Munich side,
de fazer frente.
albeit with the utmost respect for Bayern.
Grande jogo para
And I think we can produce a big performance. As I said, I think we have scope to produce a big performance. That's the only goal that I have in my mind for tomorrow. Hi, Felipe.
En español, por favor, y además que para Globovisión y Radio.
Spanish interpretation is not available for this press conference.
Spanish, sorry.
Sorry?
We just don't have the translation into Spanish. You can ask, but he can answer in Portuguese or English.
Ah, okay, okay.
Yeah,
Ele fala espanhol.
but we don't have translation.
ok.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Bueno, la pregunta es, antes hablaste del espíritu, sobre todo del fútbol, ¿no? De antes, pero que ha cambiado mucho, ha cambiado las redes, ha cambiado el fútbol también. Pero el espíritu del jugador brasilero no ha cambiado, ni del fútbol brasilero, ¿no? ¿Puede ser eso determinante para el partido de mañana, ese espíritu distinto, la habilidad del jugador brasilero?
Português?
Português.
Português ou inglês?
Ou inglês.
Ah, tá. Não, então tá. Tá, ok. O jogador brasileiro é jogador, primeiro, muito competitivo.
First and foremost, Brazilian football is very competitive.
Uma pressão
They really are
extrema, né? Tanto do
very used to external pressure, extreme external pressure, both from the press, but mainly from the fan base.
a Série A.
Almost all of these clubs in the Brazilian domestic national league that are very demanding if you don't win games. And so every player that makes it to this level, they've had to overcome a number of hurdles. There have been a lot of demands on them, and they've even gone beyond expectations which are demanded of them. And so this means that every Brazilian player is very competitive in every competition they're involved in. We often see that in South American oppositions that they're not always the favorites of winning because there are such demands, because we always talk about the Argentine teams being very competitive, but the same goes for Brazilian teams now. And we have occasionally had issues in terms of imposing ourselves. We have quality out there on the pitch and you can dominate. And of course, if you don't have that quality, then you can't necessarily boss the game in the opposition half of the pitch. But I have no doubts that the strength and the mentality that is forged in these Brazilian players' minds means that we can actually make up for a slight difference in quality. Why? Because if the European clubs were to win the Club World Cup, it's not going to change their lives. But if Brazilian clubs or South American sides would, it would certainly change our lives if we were to win this competition.
Falar.
Pode falar,
Pode
Gustavo.
falar.
Agora sim.
Could the journalist use the microphone, please?
Então vamos para o Mauro César aqui, depois voltamos aí, tá? Vamos lá, Mauro.
Is the audio working? Yeah? The second microphone here.
Doesn't work too. No.
Yeah.
So, no, it's not
It
working?
It
Yeah?
works. Yeah.
Felipe, você já falou da importância, né, de
Hi, Filipe. You spoke about the importance of keeping the ball. How have you prepared your team for the fact that
ele tem controle do jogo pela posse? Como treinar a equipe para esse evento?
Bayern might dominate the game and have more ball possession?
Dar soluções para o jogador.
I always try and give the players solutions based on how the opposition press our team.
Com atacante, outro
There are some teams that press with one striker, some with two forwards. There are some teams that don't press you and drop off.
o Bayern.
So I'm always trying to come up with solutions.
Mais agressivas, mais fortes.
Bayern are one of the most aggressive pressing teams on an individual level. So it's going to depend a great deal on our individual quality in terms of building out from the back, in terms of the quality we can produce on the pitch.
Para tentar sair dessa
And there are certain mechanisms or ways of beating the press.
temporada. Deixaram outro tipo de espaço para a gente poder.
Because when they press, then that might leave you space elsewhere on the pitch in which you can attack.
Os espaços e as soluções que eles podem ter e depois dentro do campo.
So there are solutions elsewhere, and the players need to make decisions out there on the pitch, and they need to identify that free space which are being left by the opposition.
Felipe, boa noite, Richard.
Hi, Felipe.
Em uma das respostas anteriores, você falava de
In one of your previous answers, you spoke about intensity and pace, and you also spoke about controlling ball possession.
Gostaria de
I'm thinking about Arrascaeta. I wanted to ask you about his fitness levels.
e essa velocidade. Falar nisso.
Has he got that intensity and that pace?
Com ele em campo.
Could Arrascaeta produce that out there on the pitch? Can you have that as a team? Yeah, he might play, he might not play.
Que podem
We've got a squad with a number of versatile players that can operate in different positions, and they can offer different solutions and qualities for us, depending on what the game demands of us.
até agora
Arrascaeta
cada jogo e nos dá
has been getting better game in, game out.
e depois a
He's been working very hard on and off the ball, and his quality on the ball is beyond doubt. But he's got the same chance to play as everyone else.
Simplício da Gol
Hi,
Brasil, da
Felipe.
revista Placar. Antes de começar a competição, né, o Boto falou,
Before
vocês chegou a falar
starting
também,
the
jogadores falaram que seria
competition,
interessante essa competição para ver o nível de
it was
patamar que o time do
interesting
Flamengo
to
tá,
see
o nível de
about what sort of
competitividade.
level that
Agora já
Flamengo
passou a
could
primeira
get to in
fase da
terms of how
competição,
competitive
vocês
they
já
were.
tiveram
You've already gone
enfrentamentos com
through
diferentes escolas.
the group
Já
stage.
viram
You've
também
come up against
enfrentamentos
different
de
styles
diferentes
of
escolas nessa
opposition.
competição. Eu queria saber de você, se você já sabe
I
hoje
wanted
que
to ask you
patamar,
whether
né,
you
esse
already
time
know
do Flamengo tá.
what level your
E
Flamengo
olhando assim pro
side is
Bayern de
at.
Munique, se o Flamengo
And
de
looking
frente
at
pra
Bayern
frente,
Munich,
se
do
divide favoritismo ou se
Flamengo-
o favoritismo tá pro lado de lá?
See yourselves as favourites for this game or as
o
underdogs?
patamar que o nosso time tá, porque
I've always known the level that my team is at because I've played with the bulk
companheiros, né,
of my former teammates.
competi com eles durante
Played with a number of them. They used to be my teammates. I competed with them for a number of years, and I see them compete as well day in day out on the training ground and in matches. Of course, games against European opposition
do mundial, porque
within the scope of the Club World Cup.
a pré-temporada nunca é
You know, you might play a pre-season friendly, but it's never going to be the same level as a competitive fixture like this one.
eu sei o nível, claro que eu sei o nível que nós estamos e
Of course, I'm well aware of the level that we're at, and I'd like to repeat what I said previously. There are teams that are part of the elite in world football, and Bayern are one of those teams. The individual quality of their players, 8, 10 to 12 teams in the footballing elite, they're superior to everyone else. So that means individually, yes, they could be better than us. But as a team,
quem é a melhor equipe, não o melhor.
We're going to see which is the better team, as opposed to which is the best group of individuals. I wanted to ask you about Danilo and Alexandro. They played for Porto against Bayern, albeit that was 10 years ago.
Eu fiz praticamente todas as entrevistas aqui nessa sala, Xabi Alonso.
All of the interviews here, Xabi Alonso, Vincent Kompany, no one was as tactical as you were.
Tático até agora.
Do you think this is the most tactical game that you've had so far in this Club World Cup?
O que o Alexandre e o Danilo...
Sorry, what were you saying about Alexandro and Danilo?
Alexandre e Danilo ganharam.
No, Alexandro and Danilo beat Bayern in 2015.
Agora eu entendi.
Okay, now I understand.
Eu também joguei contra o Bayern.
I also played against Bayern.
Você não viu, PVC?
Eliminamos o Bayern, sim, na semifinal.
We knocked out Bayern in the semi-finals.
Perdemos na volta. Mas... E o que você falou depois que já fugiu?
Sorry, what was the question? Okay, the tactical matchup.
Procuro sempre estudar muito. A parte tática é uma coisa que...
I always try and study a great deal, and the tactical side of the game, the solutions that exist in football, is something that's always piques my curiosity, and it did so when I was a player as well, and that's really steered my path day in, day out as a head coach. It is tactical to a certain extent. Within the game, there are occasionally there are chaotic moments where tactics go out of the window. But I have no doubts that it is going to be a very tactical matchup at times.
Em todas as partes, tanto na fase ofensiva como na fase defensiva.
Everywhere, defensively, from an attacking sense, we're up against a very powerful opposition, and they could certainly cancel us out.
Coach Jane Francis from Nigeria. You've played across various continents. You've played Esperance Tunis from Africa, LAFC from North America, Chelsea from Europe. And I'm wondering which were your toughest opponents as you're about to play also in a European team. Which of these clubs would you consider your toughest opponents, despite the result, the outcome of the games?
Okay, from the last past game?
From the group games.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think always the teams are more difficult to play, the teams which have the players with more quality. So Chelsea and have a lot of quality on the players, so which is really difficult because they never lose the ball. Even if you press them, they know how to control the ball. It's really difficult to take the ball away from them. And especially tactical level from Maresca, it's really, really high. So for me, it was the toughest until now.
Vou fazer a pergunta em inglês. Sou Kevin Antonio de Puerto Rico. I had a question. You spoke about tactics, you spoke about players, you spoke about systems, pass, and the players you respect, and other teams. But one of the things that hasn't come up is nature. Today, a game was suspended. Bayern wasn't able to travel. How do you prepare for the possibilities that different storms or nature can bring? Como você quiser, português ou inglês?
Pode ser em português, pode ser. Se você... Ok. Sinceramente, é uma coisa que nunca nos preocupou.
Honestly, that's something that's never concerned us. The climate, nature, as you said, or natural phenomena, that's never really concerned us.
De ter jogo cancelado.
I don't remember games in Brazil cancelled. Maybe the Super Cup rained a great deal and the game was suspended for 30 or 40 minutes, but it occurs very seldom in Brazil. So it's a fairly new experience for us. It has happened on the training ground. Half of our training session was shelved because of that. But we haven't prepared the game based on the climate. We've prepared the game based on the opposition we're up against. And if the game has to stop, that's either bad or good luck. It depends on the moment of the game. We hope that it's a very clean game, that it all runs very smoothly, and that it doesn't rain, or that if it does rain, then it doesn't necessarily halt proceedings, and may the best team win. Hi, Filipe. Good evening. In the last press conference, you spoke about the challenge of making sure your players stayed focused, above all with regards to the fact that Flamengo were already top of the group and through to the knockout round. You're up against a very difficult opponent tomorrow. And the challenge for a head coach in terms of preparing this game, making sure focus is high, to make sure the players aren't on edge. You know that players occasionally, when they are nervous or on edge, then they can lose their ways. What's your approach in terms of working on that to make sure that the players stay focused and they don't lose their cool?
Muito por conta disso. Obrigado.
Não, é o tipo do jogo que o jogador, você não precisa motivar de.
This is the sort of game where you don't need to motivate your players in any way, shape or form. The players are really up for it. You spoke about something that can occur, which is anxiety or over-preparation, if you will, that can create that tension at the start of the game or during the game. It's all about striking the right balance. I think every player has their own way of preparing for a match. Everyone has their own way of concentrating and focusing and going into the game. The head coach can't control who they're speaking to on the phone, how they're preparing for the game, but as I said earlier on, what we can do is try and really give them as many solutions as possible, get them on red alert in terms of what could come to pass during the match, so that then they can identify that on the pitch and they feel as best they can, as opposed to if they didn't have any information at all. So I believe that my job is to relay that information, but focus is very individual. Hello, Filipe. In the last 12 or 13 years, there's been a real dominance from European clubs against South American opposition. And in this Club World Cup, South American sides are actually managing to win. Flamengo won, Botafogo won. What does that mean? Why have you managed to mix things up? Why are things more even now?
Eu continuo achando que os times da elite europeia.
I still believe that the European elite are superior and they have the best players. You know, Vinicius Jr. is not here at Flamengo. The best player in the world was at Flamengo, but he's no longer here, but he moved to Europe to play for the best clubs in the world with earning more money, greater prestige, to play the best club competitions in the world, and that's the way of things. We are competing well in this competition. We could even win it. I think some of the Brazilian sides could even win it. Nothing's impossible in football. But we've won a game and there are these comparisons, but I do think it's pointless. There's no point in comparing things. We don't necessarily need to win a game to say that we're better than them. You only need to look at the makeup of their squads, the sort of players that are in their squads, and you know that. But over the course of 90 minutes, any team can win. The fact that Brazilian football is improving, there's no doubt about that, but we're still a long way off comparing ourselves with European football.
Aquí, Javier Cáceres, del diario alemán.
Hi, Felipe.
Usted dijo que asistió a partidos, a jogos de Portugal. Well, sorry, I have to switch then. That you watched some Bayern games at the beginning of the season, that you were quite impressed by certain tactical aspects of the Bayern.
Deixa ele fazer em espanhol. Para mim é melhor.
Okay. Puedo cambiar, sí. No, que usted dijo que asistió a partidos del Bayern de Múnich al comienzo de la temporada y que vio muchos o varios aspectos tácticos que le interesaron y que incluso, si entendí bien, intentó copiar. Me gustaría que profundizara en qué aspectos tácticos le llamaron la atención del Bayern de Múnich y qué dificultades presenta tratar de aplicar eso a un equipo como Flamengo.
Pode ser em português? Português. Ok.
Can I answer in Portuguese?
Me desculpa, não vou te falar quais.
I apologize. I'm obviously not going to tell you about the specific elements that I copied, but my teams do try and mirror some of the movements that Bayern do.
Não só do Bayern de Munique são.
It's not only Bayern Munich, there are other teams as well, but these are aspects which really fit in well with the skill set of the players that we have and the solutions that Bayern cause problems for the opposition that way. Not only Flamengo, but there are a number of other teams as well that have used Bayern as a reference point, particularly with regards to the way they press. They are a benchmark in world football in terms of teams that want to press high.
Eu posso chegar até aí, só para você.
That's all I can say about that.
Hola Felipe, ¿cómo estás? Ramón Medina de Venezuela. En español, pero me responde en portugués, no hay ningún problema. Tú eliminaste al Bayern Múnich en su momento como jugador con el Atlético de Madrid 2016, se han pasado casi 10 años, pero quizás ese partido te trae algo de, puedes agarrar algo de ese partido y trasladarlo mañana. Te pregunto porque, bueno, Atlético siempre tuvo ordenado en defensa, jugaba a veces al contragolpe, quizás por ahí está la clave también para mañana ante un Bayern que en defensa quizás es un poco lento.
Eliminamos realmente o Bayern na semifinal.
We knocked out Bayern in the semi-finals.
De bola que tomei na carreira. Essa foi a verdade. Foi o Bayern do Guardiola, né?
And that was the
em casa 1-0.
Guardiola Bayern Munich. We lost 1-0 at home.
Muito superior.
But Bayern were a much better team than us, but we were able to score a goal.
Fora de casa, né?
And we went through on the away goals rule, and that moved us into the final.
Pensando muito a sensação que eu tive dentro do campo.
And I was thinking a lot about the feelings I had out there on the pitch, and that was what
naquele jogo porque a sensação
really inspired me that game. The feeling that I had in terms of that Guardiola Bayern side.
E que o campo era maior.
It felt like they had more than 11 players on the pitch, and I really felt like the pitch was bigger than it actually was. That was the feeling I had as a player, and as a coach, I always wanted to have my players feel like that as well. So I really studied a great deal that style of play.
Boa noite.
Hi, Filipe.
Filipe, tá funcionando? Tá. Nessa semana, né, há 2 dias atrás, o Nico
2 days ago, Nico spoke to Fla TV and he said that he might be available for selection tomorrow. We saw him on the training ground. Could Nico de la Cruz be available for selection for tomorrow? Is he not yet fit to play? In theory, yes. He trained. He has improved a great deal. He's feeling good, and he could be an option for tomorrow.